So, yesterday I did a video on utilitarianism. Today I will be doing a video on Kantianism. So Kantianism is another very famous moral theory that was curated by Immanuel Kant in around the 1800s, 19th century. Where he creates the famous categorical imperative. So I will be discussing categorical imperative in Kantianism and the fundamental principles of the metaphysics of morals. So, starting with the first section, which is titled The Transition from the Common Rational Knowledge of Morality to the Philosophical. So, let's see. It goes. Nothing can possibly be conceived in the world, or even out of it, which can be called good without qualification, except a good will, intelligence, wit, judgment, and the other talents of the mind, however they may be named, or courage, resolution, perseverance, as qualities of temperament, are undoubtedly good and desirable in many respects. But these gifts of nature may also become extremely bad, mischievous, if the will which is to make use of them, and which therefore constitutes of what is called character, is not good. So, what does that mean? Essentially, within Kantianism, Kantianism is trying to birth an absolutist sort of objective moral reality in the sense of a will. So, if everyone can come together with a cohesive will, and the will be typically the exact same, that everyone is working towards something, that everyone recognizes everyone as an autonomous agent, which is basically everyone is rational, everyone has the ability to understand what a good will is, which is very similar to Plato and Aristotle and Socrates, whereas Socrates would create, if you can understand and have knowledge of these sorts of pieces of information, of having knowledge of goodness and excellence and wisdom and piety and temperance and courage and those sorts of things, if you can understand the virtues, then you yourself can then be a virtuous person. Plato then creates the things of the appetite, the spirit, and the reason of a person's tripartite soul. So you have three aspects of your soul, and one of them is trying to conquer over the others, and so on and so forth. It's kind of the similar thing within Immanuel Kant, is that you being as a free moral agent, what you are willing, what you are creating with yourself, what you want to have happen in the world, you are creating it. So, like I said in the previous video of utilitarianism, focusing on the consequence of an action, this is more focusing on the intention of an action, the intrinsic goodness of an action. You're not lying. That's an intrinsically good thing. You are being moral under Kantianism because you are not going against another moral agent, right? You're not using them, you're not exploiting them. They are allowed to choose their own response and to use their own autonomy, as you are also using your own autonomy, right? You don't want someone else to lie to you, so why would you lie to someone else as well? Of course, this can become sort of a paradoxical situation where maybe someone is kind of sadistic or a psychopath, maybe isn't thinking entirely reasonable or rational, and is only thinking reasonable and rational according to them, and they might want to punch someone in the face, and they're also willing for someone to punch them in the face. But that's not universal, right? That is an outlier. Most people are not thinking of doing that. Most people don't want to get punched in the face. Most people don't want to get hurt, shot, killed, lied to, deceived, manipulated, controlled. They want to be free, autonomous agents, right? It's a very collectivized unification of people within a will, right? Like, we want everyone to kind of live in harmony, be together, no lying, no stealing, no killing, absolute, categorical, normative statements. This is what you ought to do, this is what you should do, this is what you should not do, and those sorts of things. And so since these people are rational agents, and you yourself are a rational agent, why would you want someone else to exploit you? Well, then you should not exploit someone else. Sort of the golden rule is often associated with Kantianism. So I wanted to go another aspect. Page 66, or 65 actually, the concept of freedom is the key that explains the autonomy of the will. So, let's see this part. The will is a kind of causality belonging to living beings, insofar as they are rational, and freedom would be this property of such causality that it can be efficient independently of foreign causes determining it, just as physical necessity is the property that the causality of all irrational beings has of being determined to activity by the influence of foreign causes. So, it's trying to maximize the utility of freedom. The utility of freedom is associated with rationality, and things that are kind of deterministic, things that are foreign causes that are outside of individuals' controls, is kind of a form of heteronomy, where heteronomy is kind of outside of permissible control. You are being kind of like puppeteered and swayed with outside forces that you either don't know or are unable to control. So with the will, it's kind of giving you a sense of power, right? It's giving you a sense of power of your own moral agency, and it's giving power for other people's own moral agencies. And sort of within Kantianism, it shows that if someone is acting in bad will or in bad faith, that ultimately that sort of consequence or that sort of destruction will ultimately rain on them, since they are enacting irrational, illogical parts of their, will or their psyche and processes, right? So, with that being said, it will, since they are being irrational, and Kant believes that everything that is rational and is good and provides freedom, which is also kind of like where Hegel gets his sort of ideas of like absolute spirit and the conjuring up of freedoms being integrated into consciousness. And as you're increasing consciousness, you're increasing freedom. That's kind of an idea of Kant or German idealism and transcendental idealism. Where that's being met, like I was saying, I lost track, is that with irrationality births chaos, births destruction, and does not result in people actually being able to be free agents, right? They're not able to choose. They are under the jurisdiction of some other force, right? Maybe nature, maybe God, maybe some type of, like I said, naturalistic properties, maybe a slave master, something like that. Some of the objections to Kantianism that I've heard, and also one that I've thought about myself, is that Kant was a racist. Kant promoted some ideas of eugenics during that time in the 1800s. I think it was like 1840, something like that, 1830, I'm not sure, or like when he created his big works. But was that some individuals or some, like animals and stuff like that had innate illogicalness to them, that Europeans were the best, and it was like some type of like Italian or like on European whites, white people, and then African Americans or Africans and Hispanics, and then like Native Americans, I believe, or something like that. And his theory can promote that, but I think his theory can also promote sort of an autonomous agency of all individuals, that everyone can act within accordance to that. Of course, there is exceptions of people who have mental disabilities and things like that. Are they able to actually act autonomous and rational? Do we hold the same, jurisdiction on them? Do we hold the same weight of their autonomy? Kant would probably say no, that they're not acting irrational or immoral necessarily, since their will is being kind of bounded within an intellectual standpoint, right? Same with a person like a psychopath. It's not necessarily just the fact that it's their intellectual abilities that are preventing them from enacting something within a good will, which is what he associates kind of with practical reason, is that the nature of the universe of a moral given system is very similar to a mathematical sort of system, which I also kind of said was similar to utilitarianism, with utilitarianism being, at least aspects of utilitarianism being a point system. So with Kantianism, if you can understand the rationality and complexity of mathematical aspects of pure reason, and then attaching it with practical reason, that the goodwill of someone who is trying to do good, who knows good in their heart, and is using intellect in order to create it. It's not simply that you can just have a will of good intentions, but also being able to carry it out with intellect, and intellect being able to carry out with goodwill. Because you can use intellect for very negative, nefarious, and mischievous reasons, like we read. I'd like to read another section. Do the concluding remark on page 83. The speculative employment of reason with respect to nature leads to the absolute necessity of some supreme cause of the world. The practical employment of reason with a view to freedom leads also to absolute necessity, but only of the laws of the actions of irrational being as such. Now, it is an essential principle of reason, however employed, to push its knowledge to a consciousness of its necessity, without which it would not be rational knowledge. It is, however, an equally essential restriction of the same reason that it can neither discern the necessity of what is or what happens, nor of what ought to happen, unless a condition is supposed on which it is or happens or ought to happen. Okay, he words things horribly. There needs to be a God. There needs to be a type of creator, a type of moral rule bearer, some entity or creation, or not creation or creator, that is able to think within all realms of rationality and all realms of consciousness. He is sort of providing a Christianity narrative as well within his framework, right? Because in order for it to be absolute, to be all-encompassing, for it to be, if it is for granted for one person, it is granted for all persons, is because of God. It is provided through God. It is provided that God is absolute, that he encompasses all aspects of reality, that his will is ultimately what created everything and gives breath and life into everything, right? In order for there to be an objective, absolutist, mathematical situation of understanding morality at that base level of being provided with autonomous agency, is through that it cannot be deterministic under Kant. Of course, other philosophers will disagree with that, but he is the exact opposite of a relativist. He is an absolutist. He is purely objective, which a lot of people have said it's a bit too constrained. It's a bit too rigid in its approach, but that is the aspects of Kantianism. That is what we have to deal with within Kantianism. Thou shalt not murder, thou shalt not steal, thou shalt not deceive anyone, you cannot kill yourself in the Kantian categorical imperative, because you yourself are a moral agent. You are doing harm to a moral agent. By doing harm to yourself, you are also doing harm to others. It is a ripple effect. Categorical imperative provides or shows that everyone is kind of in an interweb of longing and connecting within each other, which is also seen within Hegel, that if one person is affected, and other people are affected. When Hegel uses, I know I'm also using Hegel's because Kant and Hegel are kind of very similar and they bounce off of each other. Hegel said that within the story of Adam and Eve, that God provided Adam with Eve so as for Adam not to be alone, and they are able to realize things of each other. And that's what Hegel uses, is that insofar as understanding myself, I need another person to help me to understand myself, and that in order for them to understand themselves, I am here to provide them a way to understand themselves. It's through a dialogue, it's through connecting, it's through conversing. When we isolate ourselves and when we stay hunkered down in our rooms and in our homes, online and social media and stuff, and we are not provided with human interaction, then it becomes very difficult for us to feel connected and to understand that these people do understand me. They might understand me in a different lens or a different perspective than I understand myself, but that lens and that perspective can be very helpful and can be very useful for myself. And the lens that I can provide for them can be very helpful and very useful to understanding themselves. And in doing that, we can then allow ourselves to birth more freedom, more expression, more will. And in that will, it's still of being autonomous of doing the right thing for what you need to do and doing the right thing for what they need to do, but it is still absolute. That allowing for their freedom of autonomy, allowing for my freedom of autonomy. Yeah. Hopefully that makes sense. It probably didn't provide enough explanation or maybe objection to Kantianism, but there is, of course, a lot of objection to Kantianism. I'm thinking maybe next time I might talk a little bit about Nietzsche. I might talk about his critiques of Christianity and his moving towards the Übermensch and the will to power, and sort of his egoistic perspective and naturalistic viewpoints of the world, of tethering yourself to this world rather than looking towards another world like Christianity. Yeah, or maybe I won't do that. I don't know. There might be a couple of other philosophers that I might want to do. Schopenhauer might be one, or Hegel I might do as well. So we'll see. But I hope you guys enjoyed the video. Make sure to leave a like, subscribe, do all that stuff, and I will see you soon. Do another video soon. All right, bye-bye.